Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am very certain that we in this House can agree that it is time that the First Nations must gain their independence from what is largely a paternalistic, almost feudal system of governance, and that it is predicated on an act that is almost obscene in its condensation and paternalism. The Indian Act is archaic. Enacted in 1876, the Act is more than 125 years old and one of the oldest pieces of Canadian legislation. It has no place in contemporary Canadian society. The First Nations deserve to have their own truly Indigenous system of governance and are quite capable of doing so. I am therefore proud to stand in full support of Bill C-428 and the remarkable efforts of the member from designated Mississippi Churchill River to bring this matter before the House. I would point out to the honourable members that Bill C-428 is not a full-scale repeal of the Indian Act. Instead, it seeks to amend and replace very specific, outdated, antiquated clauses which are neither not being enforced or are hindering First Nations from achieving lasting cultural freedom and true economic and societal success. Mr. Speaker, time and time again in this House, we speak about government accountability. Accountability to all our citizens, our constituents, accountability to this House, and most critically, accountability to our great nation. Our government remains committed to working with First Nations to make changes to elements of the Indian Act that are barriers to First Nations governance and economic growth. Today in this House of Commons, which should and must be representative of all people of Canada, I would like to speak about another type of accountability, the accountability of First Nation government to their own communities. Bill C-428 would propose to enhance the essential links between those who govern and those who are governed forevermore. First Nation band councils do not currently have the same opportunities that urban and municipalities have to independent develop and enforce bylaws, which are essential for the safe and timely running of their communities. Unfortunately, there is no requirement for First Nations to make their bylaws public except available to their members, and as a result, for years, First Nation residents and law enforcement officials have found it difficult to ascertain and find the specific nature and quality of the bylaws which exist in each individual First Nation. Moreover, it is a true statement of the paternalism of the Indian Act. First Nation band councils have had to seek out the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs to request approval for each and every bylaw they wish to pass into legislation. This cumbersome process has caused many bands to wait lengthy periods of time for formal approval, or conversely to discover that their bylaws have been declined. Other band councils have chosen to completely bypass the Minister and as a result do not openly inform their membership of those changes to band bylaws. Currently, following submission of new bylaws to the Minister, there follows a 40-day period during which the law properly is voted on and passed by the respective band councils, which may be disallowed by the Minister. No such legislation exists anywhere in any provincial municipality within mainstream Canadian society. In practice, this process often stretches out to well beyond the 40-day limit, a result of the back and forth from the bureaucracy in Aboriginal affairs to the band council, which changes requests to the already passed bylaw. The proposed bill would eliminate the requirement for Aboriginal councils to request approval from the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs for bylaws which are formulated into law as a matter of course in the various other legislative bodies, be it at the borough, village, or municipal level as they currently exist within Greater Canadian society. Bill C-428 would create a more transparent and accountable process for all First Nation band members and would remove the department and the Minister from the equation. First Nation councils would be required to publish their bylaws on their website or via some readily accessible public communication channel such as a band newsletter or widely read local newspapers, or via television or radio, or some of the above or all the above. All First Nation communities deserve to have the opportunity to hold their councils fully accountable without external and at times naive and unenlightened oversight. I believe that an integrated step in government accountability lies in providing the ability for all First Nations to not only make their own bylaws, but also to publish them. Bill C-428 would place the responsibility for bylaw making powers squarely on the hands of the First Nations community where, Mr. Speaker, it belongs. It would provide grassroots membership of the bands with greater accountability from their band councils. The requirement to make each First Nation bylaw publicly accessible would provide clarity for First Nation residents, visitors, and law enforcement officials seeking to understand their collective community obligation to either abide by or enforce the laws within the community. Bill C-428 would repeal sections of the Indian Act which, though they might remain in law, are no longer enforceable and no longer relevant. This redundancy confuses the very real issues facing the Crown and the First Nations. But before we can proceed, we must remove this redundancy so that we as a House can begin to see the portions of the Indian Act which subsidiary affect the daily lives in the First Nations people. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-428 would seek to bring the language and content of the existing statute into the modern era. By taking concrete steps to amend the language and remove outdated and relevant sections of the Indian Act, this bill addresses some of the challenges facing First Nations communities in regard to their political, social, and economic development. Firm incremental changes such as those would truly pave the way for further legislation to be developed in collaboration with the First Nation legislation, which indeed would benefit all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it is only by building on the goodwill of all Canadians who I believe wish to seek us work together on this momentous journey to bring all of our citizens to a greater prosperity and sense of self-worth that we can begin to share the true potential of this great land we call Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate.